Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Beyond the Checklist, making sure your insurance covers your restaurant's needs. We're excited you could join us. My name is Pamela Deloach, and I'll be moderating today's event. Today, we're talking about insurance. Most restaurant owners and operators know they need it, but don't know what coverage is best for the specifics of their business. If you don't understand those coverage options or know how to identify potential gaps, it's impossible to prioritize and determine if the coverage is worth the cost. In this webinar, we'll talk about the main types of insurance restaurants and businesses need, how to know if you have gaps in coverage, and how and when to assess that coverage. We are thrilled to be joined by our two speakers, Dan Wall, Sales Manager, Restaurant Insurance Solutions, Company, CoverWallet, and Aon Company, Brandy Storms, Director of Sales and Account Management, Company, CoverWallet, and Aon Company. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items. Please note the slides will advance automatically throughout the presentation. To enlarge the slides, click Enlarge Slides button located in the top right corner of your presentation window. If you need technical assistance, click on the Help widget located on the bottom left corner of your console. We encourage you to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation using the Q&A widget at the bottom of your console. We will try to answer these during the webcast, but if a fuller answer is needed or we run out of time, it will be answered later via email. Please know we capture all questions. To kick off, I'd like to ask each of our speakers to provide a quick introduction of themselves and their work. Dan, why don't you start?
Thank you so much, and thank you for having us. Appreciate you, Pamela. So my name is Dan Wall. I am, in fact, a sales manager at CoverWallet and Aon Company. Little background is, I've always kind of had this protective nature about myself. I actually joined the United States Marine Corps right after September 11th. And after I had gotten out of the Marine Corps in 2015, I kind of wanted to find a career that continues down that path of protecting people. And I truly feel that insurance, it fills that gap and really gives me that need. But thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I'm Randy Storms. I echo what Dan said. Thank you very much for having us today. We really appreciate it and love to talk about protecting small businesses, particularly restaurants. I guess I would say I'm an insurance nerd. I've been in the insurtech world now for over 25 years. As everybody always says, I didn't go looking for insurance. Insurance found me. And I've had just a wonderful time actually working with protecting and watching small businesses and restaurants grow throughout the years and protecting their dream.
Great. Well, thank you both for that. So now let's get right to it. When it comes to insurance, are restaurants struggling to figure out the kind of insurance they need?
Absolutely. So, CoverWallet and Aon Company, we specialize in a lot of micro businesses and new franchises coming up. When these restaurant owners come to us, typically what they're asking for is for the coverage that they're being asked to carry. So, for example, you might have a landlord that's telling you, you need to have X, Y, and Z coverages. Now, that might mean that they're just trying to protect themselves, okay? They don't have your interests in mind. So they're thinking about, what can you possibly do to my building or my space that can cause me a financial loss? So you need to have these insurance policies in place to protect me. That's what your landlord's thinking. They're not really thinking about those in-depth coverages that you might be susceptible to a loss for. I'll give you a little example. Many, many years ago, I had purchased a vehicle. This was back in, I would say, 2001. And, I had called my insurance company to try to get my insurance. I needed full coverage to get that vehicle off the lot, right? I had a loan for it. And I called my insurance company and I asked them for full coverage. I didn't know insurance back then, right? So I'm thinking full coverage is I'm going to be protected no matter what type of claim I bring up to this insurance company. It turns out I was T-boned by a Suburban back in that day, and that Suburban happened to not have any insurance. So when I tried to make a claim on my insurance policy, they denied my claim because I did not have the proper uninsured motorist coverage. So in
Wow.
my mind, I'm thinking that I'm driving around with full coverage, and then I have to pay out of pocket for that particular claim on a brand new vehicle to me at that time. So what we want to do is we want to try to help restaurant owners and really all business owners understand what they need and match that to the right coverage so that they don't have to go through those surprises when it comes time to make a claim.
I can't agree more with Dan. Most of the folks that we get coming through are new ventures or a new restaurant that approach us. And honestly, to Dan's point, they really don't know what they need outside of what that landlord is saying they want so that they can get that space. And that's generally just general liability. So we get people coming and just saying, oh, I just need this. And so it's really, these folks are really great at what they do, which is running a restaurant, preparing food, working with their customers. And they really need somebody to explain to them that what are those coverages outside of what is being asked to be on what they're generally looking for a certificate of insurance. Some of our more experienced restaurants owners are like Dan, and with his experience with the car insurance, they're under the assumption that everything is taken care of. They talk to somebody and they say, oh, sure, this is what you get for what you asked for. But they're not looking at the deck page. They're not looking at the whole policy and understanding what the insurance company is providing you for coverage. And as a result, the restaurant or business owner ends up being very surprised when they have a claim and they find out that that coverage didn't cover what they thought it would.
Wow, talk about a bad surprise. So, when you're starting a business, at what point should a restaurant owner do they need to get insurance? Is it right before all of the inspections, or is it earlier or later, or what? When, as a business owner, should I be thinking, okay, now it's time to get that?
Right, great question. So honestly, looking at your insurance should be one of the first priorities that you're looking to get in place, even before those final inspections. Listen, you might be scoping out this beautiful spot right on the water, right down in Florida somewhere, or on the Gulf Coast in Texas. But what you're not considering is those risks associated with that gorgeous location, right? Hurricane area. Are your insurance prices going to go through the roof? Are you limiting the carriers that you can have? Are you in a high crime environment, right? So that's going to take away certain insurance carriers that you have access to. So absolutely start getting in the market for shopping for those insurance policies prior to even landing that location. And a lot of your insurance brokers can go ahead and tell you yay or nay for a particular location, or it's going to be about this around that area, because then you have to think about the high fire zones, the high crime zones, the hurricanes, the tsunamis, so on and so forth. So, make sure that you're thinking about all the risk associated with that location prior to even pulling the trigger on that.
Oh, that's a great point. Now, Dan and Randy, you both talked about how people don't always know what they don't know. What are some specific things that restaurant owners should know about insurance that they're not aware of?
Yeah, I mean, most people think of insurance as really a way to protect your physical property and maybe your employees, right? But there's a lot more to protect. With your employees, you do have workers' compensation, right? So each and every state for workers' compensation has its own individual set of rules, but it's always going to cover those medical expenses and those lost wages, right? So even if your state doesn't mandate your workers' compensation, as soon as you hire on an employee, it's still ideal to get, especially with the cuts, the trips, the falls, everything that could happen to your employees. Workers' compensation, I would highly recommend 10 out of 10 times, right? Employment practices liability insurance as well, right? So again, protecting your employees. Employment practices liability, also known as EPLI, it protects you against the claims that are really on the rise because of society, right? And that's going to be your protection against sexual harassment, wrongful termination, improper hiring practices, so on and so forth. So, a nickname for EPLI is hurt feelings coverage, right? So you want to make sure that the feelings are protected and people aren't just going to hold a grudge against you and then try to sue you. So EPLI is outstanding for that. Um, you know, your general liability insurance is going to cover from third party, so customer bodily injury, damage to your leased space, or maybe you're in a plaza, so it would cover those damages to your neighbors, and allergic reactions. Another coverage you might want to look out for is delivery vehicles, right? So the restaurant likely doesn't have a fleet. Typically, when you see those deliveries going out, those are being delivered out of personal autos, right? So your employee's personal vehicle. Now, your employee is probably carrying around state minimum liability limits on that vehicle, right? If they were to get in an accident while delivering food, you want to make sure that you have additional protection. It's called hired and non-owned auto, okay, to cover you for those vehicles that aren't owned by the restaurant but are being used for an on-the-job task. As soon as the defense attorney for somebody that got hurt in that accident finds out that they were making a delivery, they are going to go straight after that restaurant, okay? So very good idea to make sure that hired and non-owned auto insurance is included, even if you're going to, Staples to pick up some office supplies, right? Always make sure that that is on there, because if you are making any trip for an on-the-job task, your business is at risk, right? Some other coverages are your property, right? Your business personal property is what it's called. So imagine if you can take your lease space or your own building, flip it upside down, as they always say, shake it. Anything that could possibly fall out is considered business personal property. As a restaurant owner, I know a lot of people that would love to get into the restaurant business, but the cost to get it started because of all that property is a huge, huge deterrent for many that want to get started. Protect that cost up front, right? Cover that business personal property. Some other coverages is data. So, I just got a letter the other day about a company that, went through a data security threat. So if you have rewards programs, even if you just have names and dates of birth, if that data is breached, you're still responsible for sending out those notification letters. Have the insurance policy that is able to take care of that expense for you, because that gets extraordinarily expensive, especially if there's any type of issue, through that data that was breached. If you sell any liquor or any beer, any alcohol at all, right, you want to make sure that you have liquor liability. I know a lot of states require that prior to getting your license to be able to sell, but some don't. And in that case, it's still a very good idea to have. If you overserve somebody, and the legal limit is what, 0.08, I think on average for most states, I know it is here in New York. If you overserve and they're at 0.09, which is still semi-functionable, not too noticeable from 0.07, right? If they were to drive off and cause a major accident, they're going after your restaurant, that defense attorney, for who served that particular individual. Food contamination and spoilage. If you get a shipment in, I remember Chipotle several years ago had a huge salmonella issue with their chicken. So, make sure that you're covered for that contamination just in case, there's a problem with that particular piece of inventory. If you have equipment failure, refrigeration, or HVAC system, who wants to go in Central Texas to or Houston area, to a restaurant that has a broken AC, right? I don't think anybody's going to go into that restaurant at that particular time, right? So, make sure you're covered in case of equipment failure, because insurance can actually cover those missed, that missed few days of revenue as they fix that air conditioning, right? Another thing is if that refrigerator goes back and or loses power and you lose all of that inventory that you have that coverage in place to be able to replace that. These are coverages that typically aren't included in your standard general liability being asked for by your landlord or state minimums, right? So these are the different types of coverages that you really want to look out for, when shopping out for your policies, especially in the restaurant industry.
Wow. Dan, I don't know if there's a whole lot more I can add to that. Those coverages that you just mentioned are so important because people think they have general liability and they're all good. But as you stated, general liability primarily covers slips and falls. A lot of people actually call it slip and fall insurance because it's just basically to protect you from the third party liability, not your first party, not your second party, but third party, somebody coming in and has something happen to them. So it doesn't cover a lot of the things that you have with a restaurant. It may include the space, but not even the building, much less the people or the things inside that are so important. So as Dan will agree with, when we have folks talking to and working with restaurants, the one thing the business owner policy should be the minimum for a restaurant because it does include so many other coverages that are needed. Business continuation. If something does happen and you have a claim, it helps to fill that gap of the revenue loss while things are being repaired, taken care of. That automatically comes in with a BOP generally, and it's not on your GL. It just comes in because it's part of the property form. Third-party liability is still within the BOP. You can package everything else you need into this policy and tailor it to your individual business to include the things that Dan talked about. Even it can go so far as to include the liquor liability. It can include your property in there. What it doesn't include, though, is the workers' comp. And as Dan stated, it's so important. We are in a highly litigious society. So if something happens to an employee, and the medical costs are so expensive. Just one trip to an ER for a cut, a burn, a slip, anything like that is so common in the workplace, you're looking at a minimum of $300 just to walk through the door. So that coverage is paramount. I always tell everybody one claim will pay for your policy. That's out there. And it's just, keeping the BOP, keeping the workers' comp, getting those things, and knowing you have that security, it just helps you close those gaps that you have that like fire, theft, things that you absolutely need to cover. The general liability just doesn't extend to that.
So with the BOP or business owner's policy, a restaurant owner could basically build their insurance coverage. So Dan, can you talk more about what the benefits of BOP are and what a restaurant owner should include?
Absolutely, and thank you so much. Right. So the business owner's policy or package, is the business owner's policy was originally developed to help protect retail restaurants and so on and so forth, and it automatically adds a lot of those coverages that we previously discussed into that policy if you need them. Right. So, it's not just going to throw in liquor liability if you don't sell any alcohol. Right. It's not going to, throw in EPLI if you're a family owned and operated business. Right. So you can kind of tailor those as needed. based on the type of restaurant you are, what you're selling, and the types of coverages that you're desiring based on, the previous conversation and what we were discussing there.
Yeah, Dan, what you said there, the BOP, it can definitely be tailored to your needs. And that's, for example, a restaurant that's trending over $1 million in revenue may not need liquor liability of $1 million. There are different pricing tiers associated with that. That's where you really need to take the time to give the restaurant owner the options to choose so they're protected.
Right. So that brings up the question, if I were a restaurant owner or manager, what would I do if I wanted to see if I had gaps in coverage?
Yeah, that's fantastic. So insurance, we get it. From this industry, we get it. It's one of those difficult things to talk about, right? Nobody wants to sit down and read page by page by page of their declarations pages, right? It's a book, and a book that nobody wants to read. So, the best thing that I would recommend 10 out of 10 times is to just talk to your agent. Your agent went through rigorous licensing, and they are there to help explain those declaration pages to you in layman's terms, right? So you can actually have a conversation about it and be informed. And also, I would not recommend staying with the same thing each and every year. Shop it out, talk to your agent, be like, hey, listen, this is what I'm doing, okay? Can you review this policy and make sure that I'm covered for the things that you could potentially see or you've seen, come up in the past for examples of claims, that have maybe gotten denied, or maybe claims that got paid because they had a specific coverage, right? Reach out to multiple agents, have them explain that to you, and, ask, what am I missing out on? It's definitely okay to compare one agent's offerings to another agent's offerings. I tell my clients all the time, it's not like I can just go to my carrier and tell them, hey, I want pricing. I want you to reduce this price to X amount of dollars, right? What gives me a fair shot to start pinning insurance carriers against each other to compete for your business is if you present me with a quote from a different agency. If you give me that opportunity, I can then send that to my insurance companies and say, hey, take a look at this quote. Why are you guys priced higher? Let's beat this pricing. And if they see that quote, understand the coverages behind that quote, and they see an opportunity to give us pricing, 9 times out of 10, they actually do, if it's something within their means that they can handle. So, that works out extraordinarily well if you're trying to find the best deal, sending your other agent's quote so that you can, pin those insurance companies against each other. And that's a fantastic way to obtain low prices. And the last thing that we absolutely love, here at CoverWallet is just being able to look at those quotes and find those particular gaps in coverage to be able to discuss those at a high level, right? And then sending those out to the carrier and trying to beat that original pricing, even with some of those gaps filled. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Experienced agent, that's what you need. You need the consultative approach. And we look for that, just not what's in your coverage, but what's missing. What's missing? For instance, a good example is a lot of people, when they first get insurance, they're given a sample certificate of insurance. That certificate of insurance does show all the coverages and the limits, but it doesn't show things like classifications. Those aren't there. Restaurant classification like takeout, full service, limited service. A wrong classification like takeout restaurant classified as full service can have additional insurance requirements and associated costs. Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, most people don't find out they have a gap in their coverage until it's too late, when they need that coverage and find out they don't have it. And we want to take those surprises out of the equation.
Right, right. And that goes back to that theme of not knowing what you don't know, right? So, what questions should a restaurant owner ask their potential insurance consultants to help them get the coverage that they need?
Yeah, I mean, good questions to ask would be, what kind of coverage do I need if my restaurant has takeout versus table service, right? What if we offer alcohol? What if we sell alcohol? Do you have anything to protect us there? If we offer delivery, either through our own employees or even through a third party like, Uber Eats or DoorDash, which is growing ever popular. So, you definitely want to talk to your agent about that. What do I need to protect my employees from injury or, whatever it might be, that EPLI, employment practices liability? Do I need to cover my building if I'm leasing the space, right? Do I need to cover all of my equipment that's inside my location rather than just some of it? Maybe you just want to say that you have $5,000 worth of business personal property when in fact you have $75,000 worth of business personal property. What type of penalty is there if the insurance company finds that out, right? Am I able to do that? Those are great questions. Looking at my current policy, am I protected from fire damage? I'll tell you, a lot of the policies that you will see sold, especially in the restaurant industry, there is a clause on there called damage to premises rented to you. It's also known as fire damage. If you're leasing a space, that limit right there is there to protect in the event of a fire to your leased space. Some of those policies only have $50,000 worth of protection there. So that's definitely one of those hidden coverages that you want to look out for and make sure if I had a fire and lost my complete building, am I paying for that out of pocket? Because $50,000 is, I mean, I can't even build a shed for $50,000 pretty near these days. So, that's not going to do a whole heck of a lot. My POS system, do I have firewalls or what type of security do I have for that data and for my customer data, for those reward programs? What if some of that information got out? How could I be protected?
Oh, that is excellent advice. So, for both of you, what main points would you want restaurant owners to leave this webinar with?
Yeah, I understand. People sometimes hesitate to get that coverage that they need because, you think you'll never use it, right? But I encourage you to consider what you're putting yourself at risk for, because insurance is there in the event of a catastrophic loss. It's not necessarily for those little losses that you can pay for out of pocket, right? It's catastrophic losses. So you really got to think of, what can go catastrophically wrong. And, in the words of Randy earlier, he was saying one claim will pay for your policy, right? So if you truly don't understand what you're covered for and where those gaps may lie, how can you really prioritize that and realize, is this worth the cost or is it not worth the cost? Don't be like me and call the insurance company, try to make a claim and get denied and be surprised there. So, do your research, talk to your agent, and make sure that cost is worth, that one catastrophic loss. So really, it is that individual decision. The decision's always going to lie on the restaurant owner. But make sure you're talking to your agent. Definitely prioritize insurance and fulfilling your gaps, and really understand and start to learn so that you can make that calculated decision. I always say, insurance should be something that's taught in school, and unfortunately, it never is. And we're just left fending for ourselves when it comes to insurance, and the big insurance companies are going to look down because of our lack of knowledge on their product. So make sure you're using your agents to the best of your ability so that you can truly understand what it is that you're purchasing and why those rates might be the way that they are, right? Higher rates mean typically the claim's a lot higher in the event of a claim, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's weird because we find that a lot of people as a whole feel uncomfortable actually talking about their insurance. And generally it's very price motivated. But as we've provided so many examples in the last 40 minutes, it's better to be covered than sorry. Don't find out too late that a few extra dollars a year would have protected you from that catastrophic loss that Dan just talked about. Determine what to cover. Take the advice, consultation that comes with the talking to the agent who has the experience and does this every day. We'll take the time to explain, answer all the questions, and provide scenarios that can potentially alleviate the risk that you have for your business. I mean, when it comes to owning your own business, you're dealing with people, and these are your assets. At the end of the day, insurance shouldn't be about price motivation. It should be about protecting your business.
I love that. That's a great note to end on. Thank you both so much. Now, I'd like to shift to some questions from our audience that have come through. Let's just jump right in. Question number 1. How often should you review your insurance, and are there any triggers that indicate you should review it?
Yes, great question, right? So, typically you want to take a look at that insurance policy each and every year, right? Shop it around, make sure that you're getting the best coverage, and make sure if there was a change, to operations maybe late in the year, you're covered for those particular changes. You also want to make sure that you're looking at it if you hire on any new employees, right? You definitely don't want to be surprised. Most of you tenured restaurant owners have had that workers' compensation policy, and you've been through that annual audit each and every year, right? Workers' compensation is rated a little bit differently. It's rated based on a rate for every $100 that you pay in payroll. So the price that you receive at the front end of the year is based on a guess of how much in wages are you expecting to pay out over the course of the next year. Each and every year, the insurance company is going to send you out an audit to make sure that that guess is accurate. For every $100 that you were off in that initial guess, you're either going to get a refund back or you're going to have to get slammed with a pay in full audit discrepancy, right? So if you hire on new W-2 employees, make sure you're contacting your agent to endorse that workers' comp so you're not paying for that all at once at the end of the year, right? If you get new business personal property, I kind of mentioned earlier that if you say I have $5,000 in business personal property, but really you have $75,000 in business personal property, right? Is there a penalty to that? In most cases, unfortunately, there is, right? So make sure that you're talking to your agent about that particular penalty. It's called a co-insurance penalty. So you want to make sure that if you're getting new business personal property, you're accounting for that in your policy as well, getting that endorsement taken care of. If you open up a secondary location, right, reach out to your agent, make sure that secondary location is covered. Generally speaking, a lot of insurance policies will give you about 30 days to reach out to your insurance company with that new location. It has minimal coverage if you just open up a new location prior to reaching out, but it's very much a good idea to reach out prior to opening up that location, right? So those are just some of the examples, but definitely a good idea. Any change that you're dealing with, reach out to your agent, and then I would absolutely shop that out once a year.
Great. Okay. We've got time for one more question. If I add more coverage to fill my gaps, how does that affect how much I pay for insurance?
Hmm. That's a great question. There's so much variability to that question, but um, I can't tell you how many times we've had people come, or I've had over my career, restaurant owners come with current coverage and say, "Can you beat that price?" And after we go through, we do a bit of an assessment on their needs, we can find out that, oh, you know what? You don't have coverage for this. You don't have coverage for that. Oh, well, how much more is that going to cost? And sometimes it doesn't cost any more. Going from that GL to a BOP, shopping it to different carriers, like we've talked about, there's different rates, there's different, each carrier insurance company files differently for certain coverages. And we not only may we be able to fill those those gaps for you in the coverage, but we may be able to do it for the very same price, if or nominally more, for so much more coverage. Now, if you add an additional line of coverage outside the BOP, like workers' comp, I mean, it's rated differently, but the protection, and we'll shop it out, and that will fill the needed gaps. Allow your experienced advisor, agent, the opportunity to show you what the cost will be. Don't assume that it's going to be astronomical, or don't even assume that it may not be very much more at all for converting a GL to a BOP, or adding additional property, BPP, business personal property. It all depends on the time, the carrier appetite, and the rating for that particular line of business.
Great, great. Thank you. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank our speakers, Dan and Randy, for a great discussion. We appreciate your sharing your insights and expertise. I'd also like to thank our audience for joining us. We hope to see you again soon. Have a great day.